moving on. Obviously, I've always wanted to ask these questions about the human zoo, so I hope you don't mind.
No. You want to just give it? Just want to explain what the human zoo was, Tommy.
Yeah. Well, I used to do weekends at TalkSport, and the Saturday was a football phone-in, but it didn't go too well because people were bored of talking about football by 8 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
So I started talking about wrestling, and the phone lines just lit up like Blackpool because there were so many mainly young men out there who wanted to talk about wrestling. They loved Triple H and The Rock and all that. So I started changing things there because quite a few people at TalkSport said, you can't do that. It's not a proper sport. But I did it. And then I had to look at Sundays, and Sundays were regular phone-in. So you'd start the show by going, hello and welcome. And today the European Court has decreed that Brussels will, all that rubbish. Nobody cares about that, especially not on a Sunday night. So one night I just let the phone operator go home. I said, we're all right. We'll pay you.
Yeah.
But I don't want you. What I want to do is have access to the switchboard myself in the studio so that people don't get vetted. Because it sucks all the life out of it.
Okay.
Tell a phone. I don't know if you've ever phoned a phone-in program. I have, just to see what it's like.
No.
And so they answer the phone. They say, what would you like to talk to the presenter about? And so you tell them and they go, oh, well, okay, well, you'll be the fourth caller on.
Yeah.
So by the time they get to you, you're exhausted. So what I tried doing was just pressing the buttons and going, hello, you're on the radio.
Oh, it was so cool.
And yeah, it was because you got all sorts of stuff, mainly nonsense. But somehow it was listenable. But also I was very cynical about it. I had a tech op called Ash.
Yeah.
And after about 20 minutes, we'd taken about 10 or 15 calls and they were rubbish. So I used to say to Ash, that's not going very well, is it, tonight? And he'd go, no, man, because he's a bit of a hippie. And that in itself was a breath of fresh air because nobody on air had previously ever admitted that their show was garbage. So that became a bit of a talking point. And then we started to get some interesting calls, some different calls. And the thing was that you always knew if you were listening that you were going to hear something that you couldn't hear anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit dangerous. And I did used to have to dump some people who said, gratuitously swore or whatever.
Yeah.
But I looked at the numbers, and at one point we were getting 36,000 calls an hour.
Wow.
Now that compares to the average at the time at Talk Radio and Talk Sport of about 180 calls an hour.
Wow.
We were getting 36,000.
That is crazy.
Which was an indication, I think, of the fact that we were doing something right. But, to this day, 20 years, 30 years on, I still don't know quite what that was. I think it was to do with the sense that something dangerous might happen.
Yeah.
Because we all like that, especially on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
So that was the Human Zoo.
I think you had some regulars as well, didn't you? I always remember, Stephen Hawkins that come on, and well, it wasn't actually Stephen Hawkins, was it? Of course, but he came up with some funny stuff.
No, we had. My favourite call was this bloke. He rang in. It was a Sunday night. It was about 11:30, and I just went, "Hello, Talk Sport," and he went, "This programme that you're broadcasting at the moment, it's an absolute bloody disgrace."
I remember this one.
And I said, "What's the problem with it?" He said, "Well," he said, "the callers are appalling." He said, "And this is because your presenter seems to be saying that you don't have any call operators vetting the quality." And he didn't realise, that he was on air.
Yeah.
He was phoning to complain that there was no phone operator, and he thought he was talking to a phone operator.
Brilliant.
I mean, go figure. So I talked to him for 45 minutes, and I kept agreeing with him. I kept saying, "No, I know it's rubbish, but this presenter, he's such an arrogant piece of work. We can't tell him anything." He said, "Well, I shall write to your program controller." And then I said to him, "Anyway, where are you off to tonight?" He said, "Oh, I'm flying. I'm going to be flying an EasyJet flight to Stockholm tonight." And what it was he was a pilot, right?
Yeah.
And it was Sunday night, and he had to fly to Stockholm, and he didn't want to do it. It meant that he'd had to be sober all weekend because pilots aren't allowed to drink for 48 hours before they fly.
Yeah.
So they tell us. And he was just angry, and he wanted to lash out, and so he lashed out at me. And when I told him that he was on air and he'd been on air for 45 minutes, he still couldn't compute it. He's a pilot, right? He's going to have 120 people's lives in his hands.
Yeah.
And he couldn't work out.
He was on the radio.
Even when I was telling him, you're on now. You've come straight through. That's the thing you're complaining about, that callers come straight through. And you haven't got it yet. You still haven't got it. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
so, the Human Zoo, I enjoyed doing it. I will just say it wasn't anywhere near as good as people remember they think it was. But that's the nature of nostalgia, isn't it?
Yeah, and I still listen to it to this day, because I don't know, I'm sure you are aware, but on YouTube there's several videos of like classic calls from the Human Zoo.
Really?
Yes, and I listen to it when I'm in the car, and it just makes me laugh. And
I can see that. I don't go back.
No, I can understand.
I haven't got a single video of myself on telly. I haven't got a single tape of myself on the radio. I'm sure a decent psychologist will tell you that there's some sort of mental block about it, but I'm just more interested in the future, really, because that's where I'm going to spend the rest of my life.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I'm not knocking you for listening to the Human Zoo. I do listen to other people's stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Before we came on air, we were talking about Danny Baker. Well, I can listen to him until the cows come home. Sorry, no offense to your agricultural heritage.
Very good. I mean, Charter Boy was going to be one of my questions, but I suppose the first one was is Wilfred from County Down.
Yeah.
And I always remember one you said to him once was, when I was your age, I wish I had some wisdom to pass on.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're quite there yet, because I think he said he was 76 back in there. So,
Wilfred said he was 76, Tommy. And that he was, I think he was a character.
Yeah, you always used to say, allegedly and all this. And
I think he was a character. I think he was I think he was a retired barrister or something. He was very intelligent, and sometimes he would ring me up if I was doing an issue of some sort, and he'd get me. Yeah. He'd trap me. He was sharp, and I enjoyed his company. I used to work for LBC way back, and the comedian Peter Cook, who you may be vaguely familiar with his anarchic strangeness, he used to phone LBC in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning and pretend to be a Norwegian fisherman. and he wanted to talk about current affairs through the eyes of mackerel. And initially the presenter was floored by this, but then it gradually emerged that it was one of our great comedians who was drunk, probably had been smoking something, no doubt, other than tobacco, and it was good radio.
Yeah,
because we do like it to be a bit different, don't we? I get fed up with radio that's hello, good afternoon, welcome to a packed program. My name is. I'll be taking you through until 5 o'clock when it will be time for. And now we go on with Lionel Richie, and after that it's the essential travel and traffic. Oh, shut up.
Yeah. And I think that's why the Human Zoo work quite well, and that's sort of one of my questions. A little bit later on, but I mean, is there any other notable callers that I haven't mentioned that you still stand out to you?
There were a couple of lads. They called them. There were a couple of lads aged about 12, 13, and they did this sort of comedy skit. One was called Table and one was called Chair, and I never got it. It wasn't very good. But I was so pleased that they'd put a bit of work in. They'd written a script.
Yeah,
they came on and they did it. There was a woman who just used to say, "I want to have your children," and another one was he used to phone. All he used to say was, "Can I pleasure your wife?"
Yes.
And I always used to reply, "By all means, that will save me 20 minutes when I get home." And I started to look forward to him coming on, because everybody knew what my remark would be. But somehow with comedy, the more you do it, the funnier it gets.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to pleasure your wife.
Yeah.
Well, fair enough. That'll save me 20 minutes when I get home. So little things like that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the bosses at Talk Sport, they just absolutely didn't get it, but they were confounded by the fact that the ratings were huge.
Yeah.
I mean, they really were. Enormous numbers of people, mostly people who didn't want to go to work or school on a Monday morning, and they wanted a sense of community anarchy.
Yeah,
they were angry, because you had to have your homework done, didn't you, by bedtime on a Sunday?
Yeah.
And that was a real imposition.
Yeah, no,
better than watching songs of praise, but
it was entertainment. I always found that Sunday evening is a bit of a wind down and quite dull. And
it's miserable.
Yeah,
and you've got to lay your school clothes out in the morning, and you're going to put your school clothes on, and you're going to go into school and be bored and bullied and all the rest of it. So somebody doing something anarchic, and it was a bit anarchic, the Human Zoo, is very welcome, and it strikes a chord with you because it's how you feel.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, and then sort of finally on that front, could you ever see the Human Zoo working on the radio today? Do you think it'd have the same impact? Or
no, I don't, because people have stopped phoning.
Right.
And that's technology now. They send messages in, and you can't get the humanity if you. One place where I worked, which is the reincarnation of talk radio, which isn't working. They got me back, and I said, well, look, if people aren't phoning, but you want phone in, what you have to do is rig up a machine so that it will do the voices of people's texts.
Yeah.
But it's mechanical, and there's no human being there. You know when you're listening to an AI voice. Don't you?
Yeah.
It's getting better and better, but it's still an AI voice. And the whole thing about phone-in radio is that it's got to be people, real people.
Yeah.
Even if they're semi-articulate and ill-informed, they're somebody's uncle.
We have Canary Call, which is its own little thing, its own little world. Jez has been on it a few times, haven't you, Jez?
Yeah, I've been on it. It's on BBC Radio Norfolk, Tommy. It's sort of a phone-in they do after the game. It's still very popular, and I think those sort of things, with particularly with what the BBC do, you can still see reasons for that. But I get what you're saying with because I think nowadays you look at sort of TikTok and things like that, and that effectively is the Human Zoo, isn't it? Because people go out and put themselves, influencers or however you want to call it, go and put themselves out there and do little performances and stuff, and that essentially is what I think the Human Zoo was, and it helped me for a tremendously difficult part of my life. So, thank you. And I'm really pleased that I've got the opportunity and had the opportunity to say that to you.
Well, that is kind of you. One of the things that's always kept me going through broadcasting, and still does, is the belief that although it never gets said, a small number of people are helped or supported or benefited by the fact that the bloke at the other end of the microphone, me, is trying to say to them, it is hard being a human being.
Yes.
But if you stick to your kindness and your intelligence, and you aren't ashamed of your intelligence or your kindness, then at least you'll have some personal reward in most of the things that you do in life. And that was, if I was giving out a message, I mean, my main message was listen to my program, otherwise I won't get paid. That was my main message. But the other message was there, in a sort of subterranean way. And what you just said, I found very humbling. So thank you.
No, well, thank you. And it's, I always love the introduction as well of, you got the TVR, you've had drinks at the Palace, I think was one of them. Yes. You went to Machu Picchu and all of those experiences.
That audio was made by a genius called Peter G, who is still doing the audio for Talk Sport.
Oh, wow.
When I say audio, I think they call it imaging nowadays. And that's all the jingles, all the positioners, a lot of the ads, and he is an absolute genius, and that's why they won't promote him. He's won, wait for it, 8 Sony Awards.
Oh wow!
For he's just head and shoulders and waist above everybody else who's doing that, and he came up with that idea. He said he's Scottish. He went, look, what we need to do is make you out to be the most arrogant, conceited, unfeeling. And I won't use the rest of his language because it was quite fruity. And so he came up with that thing. But all of those things were true. At the time, I did have a Renault Turbo and a TVR.
Yeah.
I was invited for tea at 10 Downing Street.
Yeah.
My family are personal friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
He didn't use everything because I spent a weekend in Birmingham with Madonna before she was famous, and we weren't going there. But yeah, I've been to Machu Picchu, you know, and watch the sunrise and all that sort of thing. But he said, your real fans will know that you're taking the mickey and it's tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do is irritate the people who are too stupid to realise that it's self-parody.
Yeah.
And he was right. And
it did.
Yeah, because you knew it was self-parody, even though it was true. But you've got very clear, you've got clearer memories of my past than I have.
Which is probably a worry.
That's because Jez stalks you.
No, it's not that. I'm 73 in December. I'm entitled not to know whether I've put sugar in my tea already.
I think talking about people that are irritated, I always remember the Scottish guy that kept ringing you, and he was, "Oh, you've swam with the dolphins, you've done all that." He was just gone, wasn't he? But I think before we move to the Portsmouth question, just for one final thing, and I think it'd be remiss not to talk about Mike Dickin and the character that he was. And I always remember you did the Clash of the Titans with him and James Whale, and talk about that experience a little bit.
Yes, I had to keep my powder dry when I was talking to those guys because Alan Brazil used to host it, and he's a fantastic broadcaster.
Yeah,
he was a brilliant footballer. No, not brilliant. He was a very, very effective centre forward.
Yeah,
and he is a brilliant broadcaster. And so I'd be sat there in this room with a guy called James Whale and Mike Dickin, who were two grumpy old men.
Yeah,
and they were at the last vestiges of their careers as phone-in hosts, because they'd been doing that job in exactly that way for about the last 30 years, whereas I was trying to do different things.
Yeah.
And Mike Dickin, we were supposed to go for each other, go at each other. They wanted fights, they wanted arguments, they wanted conceit. And I remember Mike Dickin suggesting that I didn't have a deep enough voice to do current affairs radio, which I took slightly personally.
Yeah.
And I went to go back at him and say, Mike, are you still sleeping in your car? Because he did used to sleep in his car. He lived down in the West Country, and he'd drive up to London to do 3 nightline shows, graveyard shifts they call it, 1 a.m. until 5 a.m. And then rather than drive all the way back to the West Country, he'd find somewhere to park and he'd sleep in his car. And that was true.
Yeah.
And I went to say it, and then I thought, no, that is cruel.
Yeah.
And even though it leaves you with egg on your face, being accused of being a soprano, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Because he is a human being, and he doesn't deserve the mickey being taken out of him genuinely.
Of course.
And it would have embarrassed him. And of course he's dead now.
Yeah.
And Alan Brazil's still going strong, isn't he?
He is. Yeah. He's still. I think he was. Still presenting in something on TalkSport, isn't he? I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, he's a proper character. He used to do the Saturday phone-in on TalkSport, and then he would go to the wine bar. He would drink between 2 and 3 bottles of wine. His capacity for alcohol is, I dare say, fantastic. And he tells this story about the time he was playing for Manchester United, and he was picked for Scotland. So he went home. And he played for Scotland, and then he went drinking with his mates. And they said to him, our pub team's a man short tomorrow. Will you play? So he did. So he turned out for this pub team, having played for Scotland the day before and Manchester United during the week. And after the game, there was this knock on the dressing room door, and he was terrified that it was somebody who was going to, Welsh on him, because he wasn't supposed to do that. He's a professional footballer. He shouldn't be turning out for the coach and horses.
Yeah.
And it was this little man who said, could I speak to your centre forward, please? And Alan came, what? And he went, I am a scout for Achtermachty Rangers, and I would very much like to invite you to come for a trial. In other words, he didn't realise he'd been watching a Scottish international out there on a muddy pitch with a misshapen ball, scoring 8 goals. But Brazil is full of stories like that, and he broadcasts in the moment.
Yes,
which you can only do if you listen.
No, 100%.